Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners from coast to coast. Oh, and viewers, too. Listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take, if you are using your peepers to watch me yick and yak. And the Cowboys Take you can catch on, well, anywhere. I don't highly recommend YouTube for all the reasons we've discussed. Google is not our friend. Rumble, Brighteon, you name it, Gab, wherever you want, you can grab it. Reed Lance Rosenthal, the Cowboys Take. So, today we got a pile of stuff to talk about. And as a precursor, I have book signings off and on over the next month or so. I'm going to be at the Western State Fair starting, I think, Saturday in Boise, and then up at Clay County, and then later on in the year, of course, Cowboy Christmas in Las Vegas, and also in January, the Denver Stock Show. So come on down, you readers. No, I don't have book 5 done yet. It's soon. I've been saying that for a while, but it is soon. And book 6, so please be nice. And thank you for the stressful flattery. I appreciate it, all you, literally millions of people who are waiting for those books. And I apologize for them being late. It's been a little tad busy here between the politics, the radio, the ranch, and the books. So the ranch will be guarded by my erstwhile ranch lieutenants who do a great job. I think they're happier than hell to see me go away for a few days and get out of their hair. They can get their stuff done without me like jumping up and down everywhere like a Mexican jumping bean. We're going to cover today some updates on the Trump assassination attempt. And let me tell you, they are slow walking it. The FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service, the Justice Department, they're hoping with this cacophony of news, international, domestic, political, that it all just goes away and we forget about it. Well, I'm not going to forget about it. I do have a couple tidbits to bring you today, too. And there are some new videos which just seem to keep popping up. Who would have thought? I mean, who's been hiding them for the last month? I mean, literally, it's now been a month since this conspiracy to assassinate Trump was played out. All right, so we're going to be going over that. I have a pile of rat-a-tat-tat and particularly economic rat-a-tat-tat because, folks, the gaslighting, not only does it continue, it is accelerating. And you need to know the real facts and figures, including from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the government's own mouthpiece. They just forget to tell you the stuff when they give you the headline news. You know what I'm saying? Which is fudge to begin with. And we're going to be talking, and I've been promising this, if you were, threatening this for the last, 3 weeks. Project Embridge. This is a huge deal where it concerns the U.S. dollar, inflation, your purchasing power, the reserve status of our currency, and the stability of our nation. And this is all coming down, it looks like, in October at the next big meeting of the BRICS countries. And this system will, well, why don't we just say it'll astound you? It's brilliant. And it is designed in such a way that it does not work at all with the SWIFT system, you know, the dollar-based system for international transfers and world trade. So the dollar is out in the cold along with anybody who uses the dollar. Interesting, huh? Wait till we get into this. Oh, and another little hint, it's real money. It's backed by commodities, including gold. And this is coming down the pike at us like a freight train without brakes. You need to know about it. Very important. So, without further ado, why don't we get going here, shall we? Because we got piles to cover, and I have miles to go before I sleep. So, number one, our founder's quote. So, You know, with the censorship, which is like blowing up everywhere. I mean, this show is being censored, the video, the radio, you name it. All of you need to check your spam files. Google, particularly, Google is your worst enemy, but all of them are taking political emails, informational emails on the Democrats if they don't like the information, all sorts of things, and putting them in your spam file. You should be checking that every 2 or 3 days. You will be astounded at what the folks who are looking out for American interests are doing to communications directed to you. In other words, interfering with your privacy. I'm sure it's illegal, but I just don't think this Justice Department is going to do much about it. All right. Freedom of speech is a key deal, right? Particularly leading up to this election. And the ability to know, the ability to have knowledge, the ability to gain knowledge, to find knowledge, when you are researching a subject or a person or a candidate is tantamount to making a good decision, which of course the powers that be would rather you not make. Anyway, this is Benjamin Franklin. Love him, love him. Quote, freedom of speech is a principal pillar of a free government. When this support is taken away, the constitution of a free society is dissolved, and tyranny is erected on its ruins. Republics derive their strength and vigor from a popular examination into the action of the magistrates, unquote. Just substitute the word elites for magistrates. Or shall we say illegitimately installed through election fraud, quote unquote, leaders who can't form a sentence and have a witch-like cackle laugh. But, you know, that's neither here nor there. How about the ranch story? So the ranch story, you'll kind of get a kick out of this. So we did our second cutting on the pivot. Absolutely beautiful. It was 80% alfalfa. I mean, really heavy on the alfalfa side. And fluffy and green, and everything was in bud. For those of you who don't know, if you cut alfalfa in the bud, it has its highest protein content. I mean, it was just perfect. Everything was perfect. And I made the decision to cut it, knowing that it might rain a little bit off and on for the next several days. But I was also concerned, since they were forecasting potential thunderstorms, about hail. Because twice in the last 20 years, we've gotten a hailstorm right as we're getting ready to cut the second cutting of alfalfa in the pivot field. And let me tell you, it just chews those plants up, knocks all the leaves off them, breaks stems. It's unusable. You can't even swathe it. You can't even bale it. Nothing will eat it. So I kind of took what I thought was the safest course of action. Off we went. We cut. Stuff looks great. And then the next morning, it started to rain. And it rained. And it rained. And it rained. And then it rained some more. And then it rained just for good measure because it had rained so much to begin with. So this rain went on and off, mostly on, for like 6 days. I'm not sure I can ever remember a time where we had 6 days of cloudy, dreary, rainy weather here in the arid uplands of Wyoming, but we did. And of course, there's nothing we could do with the hay. We certainly couldn't bale it. There are things that you can do if it gets wet over an extended period of time to kind of fluff it up. But that also entails risk, because once you fluff it up, if it gets rained on again, then you really have a problem. So I decided, even though I was gritting my teeth, I decided to do nothing. And sure enough, just yesterday, or actually the day before yesterday, we had our first day of, wow, no rain and sun. And yesterday was the same. And we raked her up. There were a couple little kind of moist spots, and we let it dry in a nice little wind in the sun for 3 or 4 hours this morning, and we got her all baled up. In fact, the buyer has already come and bought the hay. We've already loaded them out of the field. And we got the pivot back on, all in one day, rock and roll. So it's a story with a happy ending. But the moral of this story is, every once in a while, you face an adversity, you face an obstacle that you really can't do much about. And sometimes it's better to just sit back and let it play itself out to an eventual great culmination, which is exactly what happened in this case. Unfortunately, we're not in the same position when it comes to politics in this country because the election is less than 90 days away. All right. I'm going to give you just a little historical story because with what's coming at us, folks, you need to have, I think, you need to engender your enthusiasm, and you need to have some hope, and you need to have a warm, patriotic fighters, warriors glow in your heart. So this goes back to right before the Revolutionary War. That's right, a long time ago. April 18th, 1775. The British are on the march from Boston. Paul Revere and Tom Dawes are running around the countryside overnight, alerting the colonials, particularly at Concord and Lexington, where arms were stored and some of the colonial leaders were. That's where the British were headed. And on the night of April 18th, as the British passed his house, still many miles from Concord or Lexington, a gentleman whose name was Samuel Whitmore. He was 78 years old. Do you know how old that is in 1775? That's like the equivalent of 150 years old today. I mean, it's really old. Samuel Whitmore, as the troops are marching by, he had fought in the Indian Wars. He goes charging out of the house with 2 pistols, a musket, and a sword at the entire British Army, basically, all by himself. Well, he draws the 2 pistols. He kills 3 British soldiers with the pistols and the musket, and then draws his sword and attacks these bewildered redcoats. I mean, they're going like, what is going on? This is all kind of playing out in the dark. He was shot in the face. Then they bayoneted him 6 times. You've seen the pictures of those muskets with bayonets, 14-inch blades. And when the colonials got to him several hours later, he was on the ground, he was still alive, and he was trying to reload. Yeah. That's American grit. You better reach inside yourself and find it, folks, because we're going to need it with what's coming at us. So that's our little historical story for today. And hats off and a salute to Samuel Whitmore, who, by the way, survived for another 22 years and died at the age of 100. All right. So that's our little historical interlude, which actually I think is kind of apropos given the nonsense that's being thrown at us, the censorship, the threats, the misuse of the justice system, and I couldn't go on and on. I don't have to, you know the list. Number one, I'm going to talk about what's happening with Trump, the Trump assassination attempt. The 3-letter agencies are absolutely slow walking this. They hope it goes away. This is their MO, folks. They slow walked Kennedy's assassination for almost 60 years, and they're still slow walking it. So this is what they do. But here's a few things. Number one, there's a bunch of 3 or 4 new videos on the website, on the rightsideradio.com. Remember, upper right-hand corner, homepage, Trump assassination attempt, and that'll give you all these videos, beautifully organized. 2 new body cams, one of them of an officer with the shooter in the video for a while. And the shooter actually went up on another roof, and you can see him run. You can see exactly what his path was. So that is now all put to bed. What's not put to bed is why the Secret Service didn't see all this. You know those snipers on a higher vantage point up on the north and south barns by the stage? Remember, this is give or take 140 yards away. This is not a long ways. Not a long ways. So take a look at those. Then we find out just today, in fact, that one of the Secret Service agents, a female, is posting pictures of that day to her social media, which is a big no-no. And from what I understand, I have not seen them. Some of these pictures and videos are stuff that hasn't been released to us. Well, now she's in a world of trouble because now they have another scapegoat to blame something on. Then we find out that the agent in charge, who was a female, DEI, Cheadle's DEI. Well, she was in charge of this detail, but folks, she had never been trained in protective services. They had an agent in charge of protecting Trump who never did it before. Intentional or just really, really, really incompetent and woke? I'll let you decide. Then there's a really interesting video I've posted for you, and I have it all over the website. I have it on the Trump page. There's an interview of a guy by the name of James Files. James Files, going back to my analogy that this attempt on Trump was really a dust-off of the old JFK playbook, which I'm more convinced of with every passing minute. Number one, that I get information and more information. And number two, that I don't get information. Remember, there's a reason people keep their mouths shut and don't tell you something. That means there's something they don't want you to know. Just putting it out there, just saying. But James Files, and this is an interview done when he was in prison, and he's still in prison, by the way, for other murders, for other hit jobs. And James Files is the guy, he says, who was on the grassy knoll. And let me tell you, this is a chilling interview. And it took a long time for the interviewers to get his trust and confidence. And he was originally fingered by a whistleblower at the FBI to these journalists. And you should watch that video. And in the back of your mind, you should be thinking about what played out on July 13th in the near miss of the conspiracy against Trump's life. I guarantee you this will catch your attention. And by the way, he left some landmarks. There was a fence there on top of the grassy knoll. He left some landmarks, and these reporters went and checked them. And the landmarks he left, just little trinkets on the horizontal rails of the fence, they were in fact there. So, of course, the three-letter agencies and the mainstream media is trying to discredit this guy, but I don't think so. I think he's the real deal, And there was another real deal the day of Trump's attempted assassination, and like Lee Harvey Oswald, this kid was the patsy. That's what I think. And I think it more and more every day. By the way, the FBI seems to have fallen into a habit over the last 6 or 9 months of letting known terrorists, they know that there are terrorists when they cross the border. They know that they have been trained in assassination techniques. They know that they come from adversary enemies like Iran or Pakistan. And they know that the target is Trump, and they've let them come into the country. Last week, they arrested one guy, I think it was kind of a show, or to divert our attention from, should we say, the domestic treason which occurred on July 13th. There was a reason, right? You don't let somebody into the country clandestinely, knowing he's an assassin after Trump and financed by a state actor, and then suddenly, take him down. What about the other 100 they've let into the country? Something to think about. And finally, one of the 20-year veterans of the Secret Service Sniper Corps, right? The what they call the AC teams, has written a public letter, sent it to the newspapers. This guy has cojones. Good for him. I mean, yes, absolutely. Reminds you of Samuel Whitmore, the night of April 18th, 1775. And he just tears the Secret Service higher echelon apart. And what happened on July 13th apart. It is really worth reading. It is posted once again on the Trump attempt page, also under Rat-a-tat-tat, and some of these, like the Kennedy, the interview of James Files, which will chilling. I mean, this will absolutely make your blood chilled, particularly in the context of what we saw with our own eyes happen with Trump a month ago. This will tell you how deep and dark, underline dark, the deep state is. Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's talk about Project Embridge, shall we? Project Embridge. As I move some papers around here, a little rustle of the papers. Project Embridge. This is a brainchild of the BRICS New Development Bank, the head of it, who's the former president of Brazil, when Brazil was, still, shall we say, in capitalist hands. And she is working in concert with the top Russian economist who came up with a plan to back the new BRICS currency with assets, real assets, whether it's oil or food or gold in this case. So the new currency that is going to be released as part of Project Embridge is going to be called the unit. And the unit is going to be a 60-40 basket. Okay? Every unit owned or controlled or used for trade by any of the BRICS countries will be backed 40% by gold and 60% by other assets, including that country's own currency. And it's redeemable. If you get paid 10 units, you can take those units down and whatever the ratio is going to be and receive gold for it. Now, I wonder who's going to take a unit that you can trade in for gold or a United States Reserve note, which is the promise of a bankrupt government to pay you in paper. Let me think about this. What would I do? What would you do? Well, we all know what everybody would do, and that's what everybody's going to do. So all the gold will be stored within each country. Now, this is pretty important, okay? The BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, is behind this plan. Oh, yes, we have friends in high places, don't we, here in America? I mean, our morons who run this country have done, well, they said they wanted to dethrone King Dollar. They've done everything they can, and they are in the process of succeeding, and it's coming quick. So everything is going to be stored in gold kilobars. Every country will own its own gold. You've heard about over the last, 6 months, all these countries going to London and going to New York and going to Washington, D.C., and repatriating their gold that was held in London and New York and Washington, D.C. and elsewhere back to their own borders. We're talking about 40 or 50 countries, African countries, India, you name it. Everybody's repatriated their gold from the West, right? From the woke West, yeah. From the West who put on the Paris Olympics, right? Okay, great. And they can use this currency, the unit, in conjunction with their internal currencies to trade across borders with, let's say, their neighbors. I mean, it's a brilliant plan. I don't have the time, nor, to be honest with you, do I have the detailed expertise to bring you everything that's going on with this. But once again, we have some tremendous videos posted this week on the website, on the rightsideradio.com, economy, on the preparedness page, which is another link up in the upper right-hand corner of the homepage, under rat-a-tat-tat, under family safety. This is a big F-word deal, big deal. And this is probably going to be announced in October. right before our election. The reaction of the markets to this announcement, which everybody said was years away, right? Years away. Oh, don't you worry about it. The dollar's going to be the reserve currency for years. They'll never get their act together. Those BRICS countries, they're going to be arguing. You've heard all the arguments. Well, hate to tell you, but, more gaslighting, more gaslighting. That's what we can expect from our government. And that's what, unfortunately, all the people in the West who love freedom can expect from their governments. The English, the French, you name it. This is really important. So the dollar, this system, Project Embridge, this is designed to not be compatible with any Western system that uses the dollar or with the dollar. So there's really no way for the United States or those folks who use the euro over there in Europe, or euro dollars, which is a derivative of the two currencies over there in Europe, there's no way for them to convert easily dollars, euro dollars, or euros into units. So it's like the West has now, what the East has done, they have reversed the sanctions process, right? They're basically saying, take your SWIFT system and shove it. And by the way, we're sanctioning you. You can't come in our new system with gold and commodities and, roughly 75% of the world's population and give or take 75% of the world's geographical, topographical areas, land areas. Yeah. Okay. And by the way, over 55% of the world's GDP. We can't play in that sandbox anymore, right? Wow. So the last thing is, you've noticed that all these big central banks of all these countries, literally scores and scores of them, have been buying gold like it's going out of business. Well, what's going out of business, unfortunately, is the dollar. Gold has always been in business for thousands of years, and it looks like it's going to continue to be in business even more so, in a more pronounced and foundational way going into the future. So all these countries have been dumping their treasuries. They own treasuries, T-bonds, T-notes, T-bills, United States, because the dollar was the currency they had to use. They're now dumping them. They're not dumping them too fast because they don't want to create a panic and ruin whatever they have left to dump, right? It's pretty smart. The Chinese and the Russians are very smart. They're way, way, way smarter long-term thinkers and chess players than are our sorry excuses for checkers playing leaders. It's really distressing. It's really distressing. And by the way, our leaders would not be in power, well, put aside the election fraud, if at least somebody didn't vote for them. So guess what? I'm kind of blaming all you folks who voted for him too, because you didn't listen to Benjamin Franklin's admonishment. Wisdom is power, and it's the foundation of good decisions, which is the foundation of maintaining your freedom, which you are about to vote away. Wow. I'm going to have more on this as this thing comes up, but circle October. That's only 6 to 8 weeks away, folks. This is a really big deal. Let me underline this. This is a really, really, really big deal. You better learn all you can about it. Listen to the videos of experts. I'm not an expert. Listen to the videos of the experts we have on the website. I'm sure you can find other stuff on it now that you've been alerted to it, and get acquainted and think about what you can do to protect yourself, your family, your freedoms, your property. Okay. Then we have the gaslighting on the economy. This all kind of ties in because, they have to convince you that everything is A-okay. Don't you worry your pretty little heads about nothing. This economy is the best in the world. We're growing leaps and bounds. Wages are rocketing. Inflation is dropping like a stone. Vote for me, says Kamala Harris. By the way, along the lines of the election, another video for you, which you really ought to see. This is an interview of the head Republican who's tried to work with Tim Walz as governor of Minnesota. And we'll get into this in just a minute in the rat-a-tat-tat. You need to watch that video, okay? I mean, there's nothing they're not gaslighting you about. Tim Walz is like, wow. He might be worse than Barack Obama and Kamala Harris rolled into one. That's no kidding. All right. So in July, supposedly the CPI, remember all these numbers are put out by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, right? And obviously they've been fudging the numbers for 18 months. We've talked about it. I've brought it to you. You can hear it everywhere. Well, in July, they said the CPI, Consumer Price Index, was only going up at a 3% annual rate, and that was down 0.2% or whatever, doesn't matter. It was decreasing. Now remember, the BLS, to come up with these numbers, has all these stats. And when you dig into the BLS components, which of course virtually no one does, like 1 in a million, a geek like me does, the cowboy geek, at your disposal, at your service. So think about this. They're telling us that inflation is 3%, which, by the way, excludes food and energy. Because, listen, you don't need energy, you don't need heat, you don't need lights, you don't need to travel, you don't need squat, man, and you certainly don't need to eat. Let me give you some individual statistics on various items which we use every day, which I would consider in most cases necessities, that the BLS had, but they didn't share with you, nor did they include in that CPI number. Here we go. So, eggs up, this is year over year, over the last year. Eggs up 10.2%. Juices and drinks, 22.1%. Beef, 10%. This is uncooked beef. Bacon, 8.2%. Pork, 7.4%. Motor vehicle insurance, 19.5%. 19.5%. Media, this would be, I want to date myself and say records. So, you know, the videos, whatever you guys buy for media to plug into whatever, listen to, okay, 18%. Yeah. And then sporting, like admission to sporting stuff, sporting goods, that kind of stuff, 15.1%. Elderly care, 8.1%. Indoor plants, 8.3%. Photography equipment, 10.1%. Hospital costs, hospital stays and services, 7.1%. Motor vehicle repairs, 6.7%. Delivery services, UPS, FedEx, etc., USPS, 6.7%. Veterinary services, for all you folks who have friends who are pets, 6.4%. Tolls, you know, tolls like on highways, some of which aren't even owned by Americans, like the Beltway in Denver, E470, is owned by Saudi Arabia. So think about that as you drive through and get billed for your toll. Toll, 6.3%. Home insurance, hold on to your bippy, 30 to 400. That's 400, 400%. There are actually places in Florida now which have been flooded out twice in the last 7 to 8 years from hurricanes that have seen 400% increases in insurance, 400%. But home insurance is up 30 to 70% across the board. And should we say bad things can happen to you lands, like out here, which is fires primarily, it's up 150%. Think about that in terms of costs for home ownership or property ownership, right? The Philadelphia Fed, the Philadelphia Fed, I'm not making these numbers up, comes right from the Philadelphia Fed. They are saying basically that 23.5% is the average increase in the cost of food year over year. Never mind all the individual items I just gave you, 23.5%. But somehow this doesn't come out in the CPI or, the headlines that the mainstream media plays out for you. Right. And home prices have now reached the point, even though they've started to decline, as I brought to you last week, and they are starting, that decline, by the way, is becoming steeper and more rapid. They're still at 5x income. That's right. 5 times income for home prices. It was normally somewhere between 1.5 and 2.25. All right. So as we can see, the economy is absolutely terrific, and those folks are just doing a great job, and they certainly deserve to be reelected, don't you think? Absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't want to miss any part of their fun ongoing. All right, so let's do some rat-a-tat-tat, shall we? Information, censorship. All the big conservative sites and the little ones like me are getting siloed. In other words, their algorithms are being suppressed. The movement of their links and stuff are being suppressed. One of the things that you can do, whether you're listening to me on AM radio or whether you are one of the viewers on one of the platforms on the video, the Cowboys Take, pass the link on in your emails to your friends. Ask them to pass it on. And not just with my shows, with any shows like mine, any, Glenn Beck's, Sean Hannity's, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we have to beat them at their own game, and their own game means bypassing where they can put up roadblocks to information. Remember Ben Franklin's quote. Remember it. Okay, I'm going to remind you again. Get involved, start watching, and start contributing to your Senate and House campaigns. If you don't carry the Senate, you can't stop treaties, the UN, the WHO. I can go all the way down the list. And you have no control over judicial nominees. Did any of you look at those videos I posted of the Republicans, particularly Josh Hawley and John Kennedy out of Louisiana, grilling these supposed future federal judges, lifetime appointments? If not, you ought to. That will motivate you. I flat guarantee that will motivate you. And the House, folks, if you're going to get any investigations done, if you're going to find anybody with cojones to get somebody arrested and tried and, if found guilty of treason, to be appropriately dealt with, it'll be on the side of the House. And the House controls the money. So they can stop anything they want with literally the flick of a pen. Just say, you ain't getting no more money. You're done. Close your doors. Stop doing this, stop doing that, whatever. Okay? Get involved in those elections. Get involved in your local elections. Really important, I'm telling you. And time is running short. Tick tock, daylight's wasting. You might have heard that Trump's plane had supposedly some hydraulic problems, had to set down in Billings on his way to his Bozeman rally. He took a private jet from there. I brought you a story 5 or 6 years ago, for those of you who have been listening to me for a long time, about the 58 friends of Hillary Clinton, Hillary and Bill, who are no longer with us. Suicide like 2 shots in the back of the head, and out of 58 people, 8 plane accidents. What are the odds of that? Well, anyway, we don't have any proof of anything. I'm sure the Trump team is working on it, and hopefully they'll figure it out. On the international front, so Ukraine now holds, and everybody's giddy over this, right? In the Kursk region of Russia, they now hold up to about 1,000 square kilometers. That's about 600 square miles, they say. And the satellite pictures seem to indicate, whatever the exact amount is, it's a really big area and it's expanding. And they're trying to grab the nuclear plant, which now is just miles to the north of their front lines. And it strikes me that the Russians could probably beat this back in a heartbeat, I mean, think about it. But you know, if you study history and you study Russian military history, you'll see, and it goes all the way back literally to the wars between the Russian people and the Khans and the Mongols. The Russians are famous, and look at Leningrad. Okay. Look at Napoleon. The Russians are famous for falling back, letting the enemy come in, cutting off the rear lines of the enemy with a pincer movement, and then destroying the now encircled forces. And somehow, I think the Russians are using that playbook again. And the Ukrainians, and of course NATO, and our fearless leaders, who evidently have never cracked a history book, are falling right into it. I don't wish that on any of the people on either side over there. I mean, there's been a lot of blood spilled, in my opinion, for virtually nothing other than the enrichment of some and the power rush for others. But we'll keep an eye on it for you. And the Ukrainians evidently have tried to attack this nuclear power plant they're headed towards with drones. So, you know, a potential nuclear incident of some type is perhaps on the drawing board. We don't know. Harley Davison. You know, I brought you the story about Tractor Supply and their woke, like, make me gag president, and their DEI and ESG. And now supposedly they've completely backtracked because they lost all this business, like 60% of their sales. Guess who went woke over the last 2 weeks that everybody just found out about? Harley Davison, the motorcycle guys. I mean, it's freaking unbelievable. And on top of that, we have Disney, who we know is woke, and they just came out with another Star Wars sequel. But don't get too excited for those of you who, like me, are at least a huge fan of the first 3 Star Wars. Yeah, because it seems that they have intergalactic witches who are also lesbians in this Star Wars. Yeah, terrific. Make sure you get your advance tickets for the kids. Have you ever heard of the Thucydides trap? Hope I pronounced that right. The Thucydides trap. The Thucydides trap is when, to use an analogy, an old animal, dog, wolf, lion, is being challenged by a new young lion, dog, wolf. Well, the same thing happens with countries. And you can go all the way back, once again, in history, and you can see what happened between Sparta and Athens. Athens was growing its power, kind of similar to China, keeping its mouth shut, you know, show little light, as the Chinese say, show little light. And Sparta was getting worried that Athens would soon get to the point where Sparta would not be able to control them. And of course, came the great wars between Sparta and Athens. And I think we are kind of falling into the same, though thousands of years later, the same Thucydides trap. I really do. I'm going to be covering more and more international stuff for you because it's critical, particularly as it ties into the economics and the monetary system and the coming Embridge scheme, which is going to be put into play by the BRICS countries. Private property. Another video on the website under private property and in Rat-a-tat-tat. This is about some poor family, the name of the Mod family, who are indicted. I'm not making this up. Indicted, facing, huge legal fees at the least, huge fines, possible imprisonment, because a fence, which has been in the same position as I understand it, the video is on the website under private property, because a fence is on Forest Service lands, although it's been surveyed and blessed by the Forest Service for over 100 years. There's lots more in this story, but particularly you folks who own land, remember my series on their grab for your private property? Yeah. Watch this video. It'll make you think, I guarantee you. Last but not least, we have a great video of the leader of the Republican Party, who is also the minority leader in the Minnesota legislature, talking about what she has found in working with Tim Walz. And let me tell you, she's very smart. She's very measured. It's straight business. And the interview was conducted by a gal from Forbes, who, by the way, was great. No monkey business, no politics, just good straight questions, good straight answers. It was excellent. And let me just give you a little taste, because you ought to pass this video on to everybody you can think of. And remember that Kamala Harris is worse than Walz, even though they're trying to backtrack on all their policies and even stealing policies from Trump. This is just a couple of things you'll hear about in this video. So when Walz took office as governor, remember, it was by the chin of his chinny chin, right? Yeah. In 2020, the year of the fraud. Well, I'm not saying anything. I'm just throwing it out there for you to think about. Well, there was an $18 billion state surplus in Minneapolis. Remember that you'd had a Republican governor who was great for the years preceding the election of Walz, the supposed election of Walz. And one of the things he promised during the campaign, along with the Democrats, is that they were going to get that money back to the people, because it was the people's money, and everybody in Minnesota who was a Minnesota resident was going to get a $2,000 check. Well, the $2,000 check never happened, and instead they increased the state budget. Remember, this is a state budget, and not a real big state either in terms of population, by $10 billion. And they are now headed toward an enormous deficit sometime in the next 12 to 36 months, right? There you go. Okay. Then the educational standards, the testing, the success in testing has gone, boom, off a cliff since he took office. Remember, he was a teacher before he was a politician, or before he was running from the enemy while he was in the National Guard. He was absolutely horrible during the COVID deal. There's actually reports out there that he was telling cops that they could draw their guns on people who were out on their porches during the lockdown. I have not verified that. There are articles out there. I'm not going to put them on the website. You're welcome to do your search, DuckDuckGo, because you won't find it on Google, and see what you can find. Based on the other things I'm seeing, I wouldn't doubt it, but I can't verify it. On the last day, the evening of the adjournment of the state legislature in Minnesota this year, well, guess what? The Minnesota legislature, which is now run by Democrats, though not by much, 4 Democrats in the House, 1 in the Senate, okay? And one of the things that Tim Walz preached when he was running for governor is that he was going to unite Minnesota and it should all be under one party so they can get good stuff done. Well, now we know what the result of that is. But they passed a 1,400-page bill, which was never printed, never read, could not be gotten online because there was some problem with the portal, you couldn't get into it. It was passed on the last day, in the last flurry of activity, with no bipartisan whatsoever, totally partisan bill. And this governor, who stands up and talks about the threat to democracy, signed it. I'll tell you a little bit about our buddy Tim Walz, but you should watch that video. It's excellent, and it's straight news. It's no political or emotional hanky-panky at all. Last little tidbit. I brought you a lot of election fraud news and jaw-dropping, gut-wrenching, really. I mean, if you are an American patriot, gut-wrenching news on election fraud that's being uncovered and litigated now. Last week, if you didn't hear it or see it, please do so. But Smartmatic, who just so happens to provide lots of the voting machines. When are we going to go to paper ballots, folks? Paper ballots. Lots of the voting machines in lots of the states. Well, their president was just indicted for fraud and bribery. Oh, yeah, pay to play. You pay me, I'll make sure you get the votes type thing. And Smartmatic, this is the left in full glory, right? It doesn't matter what you prove, what you have in black and white, what you have on video. It's Saul Alinsky's handbook. Deny, 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 divert, 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 obfuscate, obfuscate, obfuscate. The end justifies the means. So Smartmatic came out like several hours after this huge indictment of the president of the election machines company. And they said that they were proud of their integrity and transparency. Not a word about the indictment. No apology. No nothing. They're proud of their integrity and transparency. Okay. Well, I think we'll have to figure out a way to make sure that the words they're throwing at us is the words they're going to live by. How's that? This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio. I am out of time. Keep the wind at your back. You can see me, or we can talk, or you can listen next week. Coming right at you.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.